In Autocracy, Inc., journalist Anne Applebaum explores the sophisticated networks that sustain modern autocracies, which include Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. These regimes collaborate to maintain power, often evading international sanctions and supporting each other through illicit trade. They undermine transparency and accountability, use brutal tactics to repress opposition, and control narratives through disinformation. Western institutions play a role in enabling them, and their corruption has global impacts. Democracies can fight back, however, and Applebaum details tools and tactics that can be used effectively to ensure transparency and protect freedom. Tyrants United. In the 21st century, autocracies are not run by a single bad guy, but by sophisticated networks. Autocracy, Inc. These networks rely on the military and police, kleptocratic finance structures, and tech specialists for disinformation, propaganda, and surveillance. Members of these networks communicate with other autocracies and occasionally with democratic nations. Corrupt state-run businesses from one dictatorship trade with those from another. Propagandists share resources and themes, such as the depravity of democracy and the stability of autocracy. Modern autocrats can be communists, monarchists, nationalists, or theocrats. Their regimes' historical motivations and objectives differ. However, leaders of Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea share a determination to deprive citizens of influence, push back against transparency, and repress challengers. They maintain opulent residences and structure collaborations as for-profit ventures. Their bonds are cemented through deals designed to evade sanctions and exchange surveillance technology. Autocracy, Inc. works together to maintain the dominance of its members. Belarus, criticized and shunned by international bodies, receives investments from Chinese companies and support from Russia. Venezuela receives loans from Russia and Iran and support from Cuba and China. These regimes use the international narcotics trade and illicit gold trade to maintain wealth. Dictators in Venezuela and Belarus are hated by the public and would not win free elections. Strong opposing movements exist for both. However, these movements fight not only local autocrats, but also global networks that provide financial and technological support. Open brutality is not a source of shame for modern autocrats. The Iranian dictatorship represses women. The Chinese government brags about its repression in Xinjiang and Hong Kong, and the Zimbabwean regime harasses opposition candidates. Autocrats hate democratic values because they pose a challenge to their authority. Independent judges, a free press, and empowered citizens can hold rulers accountable. Autocrats seek to destroy democratic ideas and movements, both at home and abroad. Russia began a full-scale war against Ukraine in 2022. Russia, a key player in the autocratic network, sought to disrupt international norms. Vladimir Putin's invasion disregarded human rights, international law, and treaties. Russian forces arrested officials, built torture chambers, kidnapped children, and targeted emergency workers. They stole Ukrainian resources and annexed territory. Russia's autocratic allies, China, Iran, and North Korea, supported it. By 2023, Russia aimed to create a new world order, deepening ties with China and developing a Eurasian digital currency. Autocracies believe they are winning, supported by shared technologies, economic interests, and a determination to retain power. The greed effect. At an old hunting lodge near Vienna in the summer of 1967, Soviet communists were hosted by entrepreneurs from the gas and steel sectors in West Germany and Austria. Despite the recent history of Soviet troops in Austria and ongoing Cold War tensions, they shared common interests. Soviet engineers had discovered large gas fields in Siberia, and new technology made gas cleaner, cheaper, and easier to transport. They discussed building pipelines from the communist east to the capitalist west, leading to an agreement in 1970 for the first gas pipelines from the USSR to Western Europe. There had been little trade between the Soviet Union and Western Europe or the United States before this agreement. Pipelines required long-term contracts and stable political relationships. Willy Brandt, the West German foreign minister, saw this as a way to prevent future military conflicts. As chancellor, Brandt made Ostpolitik, or Eastern policy, a central part of German foreign policy, linking Moscow with European cities through pipelines. The Reagan administration imposed export controls on pipeline equipment, concerned about Soviet economic leverage over the West. Despite Soviet support for terrorist groups and suppression of political opposition, gas continued to flow west, funding Moscow. The concept of Wandel-durch-Handel, or exchange through trade, became popular in the 1990s. The idea was that commerce would integrate Russia into the democratic world and provide political and cultural unity to Europe. In the late 1980s, many Russians thought their country could change. Reformers believed that interaction with the outside world would usher in a new political and economic order after the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Putin had other ideas. Though he still harbored nostalgia for the Soviet Empire, he sought to overhaul the Soviet economic system. Putin's Russia developed into a mafia state designed to benefit its elite, who could hide money abroad. No fair market existed. Wealth came from state favors. In 1992, Putin was involved in a scheme to steal money from St. Petersburg. As deputy mayor, he issued export licenses for raw materials, which were sold abroad. The money vanished into the accounts of companies owned by his friends. Subsequently, more intricate plans emerged, incorporating real estate, front firms, and bank accounts across multiple nations. Legal professionals, politicians, corporations, and other Western establishments were instrumental in making these schemes possible. Western companies bought the exports, regulators ignored bad contracts, and banks accepted the money without question. In Frankfurt, Putin and associates established the St. Petersburg Real Estate Holding Company in 1992. By 1998, it went public, and in 1999, the German Federal Intelligence Service reported it was laundering money. No charges were filed against Putin. Western participation was critical, with partners from Germany and Liechtenstein. They included attorneys, accountants, and even Gerhard Schröder, the German chancellor. Putinist Russia emerged from this immoral world of international finance. Western leaders spoke of democracy while their institutions helped build autocracy. By the time Putin took office, he was aware that while Western democracies promoted liberal values, they also supported authoritarian governments. He used democratic slogans while building a dictatorship. Elections had no real choice, and genuine opponents were harassed. Russian capitalism was similar. Banks and companies often served as money laundering operations. In 2010, the Warren Steel plant in Ohio, owned by Ukrainian oligarch Ihor Kolomoisky, faced safety violations and eventually shut down. Kolomoisky bought properties in the Midwest as part of a money laundering operation. American real estate agents often didn't check the source of funds, allowing anonymous purchases. Kolomoisky's scheme was uncovered due to Ukraine's 2014 revolution, not American investigations. Americans rarely acknowledge their role in enabling foreign corruption. The hidden financial world, created by autocrats and the international financial community, undermines the rule of law globally. The collapse of Venezuela. Hugo Chavez became president of Venezuela in 1998, promising to fight corruption and create a new Bolivarian republic. However, corruption soon infiltrated his government. Jesús Urdaneta, Chavez's chief of internal police, warned him about officials padding invoices, but Chavez ignored him and asked for his resignation. This signaled to the ruling elite that loyalty allowed them to steal. Similar to Putin, Chavez decided to establish a kleptocracy in Venezuela in order to hold on to power. His regime dismantled democratic institutions and corruption became rampant. During his 14-year rule, Venezuela earned nearly $800 billion from oil exports, but much of this money was stolen. Investigations revealed billions of dollars in Swiss and Portuguese banks. Currency exchange manipulation also became a major source of illicit revenue. The state's multiple currency prices allowed people to profit from artificial exchange rates. Some students studying abroad gamed the system. Well-connected individuals claimed millions for fake imports, generating fake paper trails to access cheap currency. The exact amount stolen is unknown, but estimates suggest it could be as high as $300 billion. Venezuelan officials also laundered money into property in Florida. Chavez's regime hid these scams from the public, convincing many that his revolution was good for the poor. Admirers turned a blind eye to the corruption until it killed the economy. The oil business was the first to decline. Chavez fired thousands of oil workers, replacing them with loyalists. Commodity prices fell, and sanctions accelerated the collapse. Currency exchange scams led to shortages of essential goods, and hyperinflation worsened. By 2020, some people were facing starvation, and only those with access to dollars could purchase imported commodities. Venezuela's foreign relationships helped the regime survive. Russia invested in oil and agriculture, while China loaned money without conditions. Cuba supplied soldiers and intelligence experts. Turkey traded gold for food. Iran provided help with factories and refineries, along with advice on repressive tactics. These alliances kept the regime afloat, allowing it to evade sanctions. Zimbabwe's plight. Hubert Angel, an evangelical pastor and British Zimbabwean businessman, preaches the prosperity gospel, proffering healing, prophecy, and financial advice. He claims presidents and billionaires seek his guidance. Angel predicts events like volcanic eruptions and soccer victories, broadcasting prophecies on his YouTube channels. He has published books on hearing God's voice and defeating poverty. In March 2023, Al Jazeera's documentary Gold Mafia revealed Angel's involvement in a gold smuggling scheme linked to Zimbabwe's ruling party and President Emerson Mnangagwa. These operations used human couriers to smuggle gold to Dubai. This gold belongs either to people who have stolen it or to people who cannot sell it because of international sanctions. Angel, appointed Zimbabwe's ambassador-at-large, used his diplomatic immunity to facilitate money laundering. Angel denied the documentary's claims, calling them misinformation. Angel's assistant, Ricky Doolan, another evangelical pastor, was filmed secretly. Doolan told an undercover Al Jazeera journalist that Mnangagwa would support the scheme and asked for a $200,000 fee to set up a meeting with the president. Doolan later claimed the documentary was edited to portray a false narrative. Political corruption in Zimbabwe dates back to 1980 with Robert Mugabe's one-party state. After chaotic land reforms in 2002, farm production collapsed and mining became the main source of hard currency. Zimbabweans found gold easier to export and sell off the books. Financial systems worldwide have adapted to kleptocratic cash, with the UAE and Turkey facilitating money laundering. This influx of dirty money empowered regimes to become more autocratic. In Kyrgyzstan, Russian money emboldened the regime, leading to harsher repression and restricted press freedom. In Zimbabwe, Mugabe and Mnangagwa evolved into oligarchs, hiding money through complex transactions. Mnangagwa shut down the rule of law, amending the constitution to control judges and passing laws to silence dissent. The 2023 elections were rigged, and Mnangagwa maintained power with support from China and Russia. An echo chamber of propaganda. The Communist Party of Poland conducted partially open elections on June 4, 1989, which precipitated the collapse of communism in Eastern Europe. That same day, students who were demanding democracy, accountability, and freedom of speech were ordered by the Chinese Communist Party to leave Tiananmen Square, leading to arrests and fatalities. China subsequently sought to use new information technologies to crack down on democratic ideas. China built the Great Firewall, a system that blocks specific words and phrases online. Foreign companies initially helped, but China eventually pushed them out. The regime combined online tracking with offline security cameras and police inspections, especially in Xinjiang, where China's minority Muslim Uyghurs have faced intense surveillance. China's surveillance system could spread globally. Pakistan, Brazil, and Turkey have adopted similar technologies. Democracies, especially hybrid democracies that sometimes align with the democratic world and sometimes don't, might also use these tools, as seen with Pegasus mobile phone spyware in Hungary, Mexico, and India. During the pandemic, China's strict lockdowns led to protests, showing that even intense surveillance can't prevent dissent. Autocracies might use these protests to justify more repression and attack democratic ideas. Modern autocracies don't promise utopias but promote cynicism, discouraging political involvement and hope for democracy. Chinese propaganda emphasizes national pride and contrasts its order with democratic chaos. Russian media focuses on the decline of Western countries, portraying them as weak and immoral. The goal of this is to keep Russians from integrating with Europe. Russian state television spends a lot of time on America's culture wars, especially gender debates. Putin often mocks transgender rights, aiming to show Russians that liberal democracies are not admirable. He also tries to build alliances with far-right supporters in Europe and North America by portraying Russia as a white Christian state, despite Russia's low church attendance, legal abortion, and multi-ethnic population. Chechnya, part of Russia, enforces some Sharia law and has persecuted gay men. Putin's image of Russia as a strong, traditional state against weak democracies has gained some followers in America. White nationalists in the 2017 Charlottesville rally chanted, "Russia is our friend." Russia participates in international organizations promoting traditional values. Putin sends periodic messages to this constituency. In 2023, he told a press conference that he supports traditional gender roles. Just before this, Russia banned the international LGBTQ+ movement as extremism and raided gay bars. Autocrats often use strong feelings on feminism and gay rights as a ploy. Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni passed an anti-homosexuality bill in 2014. He accused democracies of social imperialism. Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orbán also uses culture wars to distract from corruption and his ties to Russia and China. Autocrats tend to dominate national conversations. Chavez frequently appeared on TV, preempting regular programming. His Sunday talk show, Hello President, featured long monologues and celebrity guests. This approach prefigured Donald Trump's 2016 campaign, which used social media to dominate discussions. Both men lied blatantly, a tactic also used by Syria's dictator Bashar al-Assad. Soviet leaders tried to make their lies seem real, but modern autocrats like Putin and Assad lie blatantly without offering counterarguments. This creates confusion and cynicism, making people disengage from politics. At a 2023 dinner in Munich, a European diplomat was surprised by African students' acceptance of Russian propaganda about Ukraine. This is due to China's and Russia's campaigns to influence media, academia, and culture worldwide. China invests heavily in international media, producing content that shows China positively. Chinese-owned StarTimes satellite TV prioritizes Chinese content in Africa. Chinese media outlets cooperate with Venezuela's Telesur and Iran's Press TV. RT, Russia's international channel, also has close links to China and spreads anti-Western messages. These media networks amplify each other's narratives, creating an echo chamber that spreads autocratic propaganda globally. The online news service African Initiative spreads conspiracy theories about Western health work in Africa, discrediting Western doctors and vaccines. The US State Department linked it to Russian leaders. In Europe, RN Reliable Recent News creates fake news sites mimicking real ones, such as Reuters CFD instead of Reuters.com. It's part of Doppelganger, an information laundering operation run by Russian companies. In the US, Russian strategists created social media posts against military aid to Ukraine, spreading false stories about corruption, which influenced some American politicians. After the 2023 Maui wildfire, Chinese trolls used AI to create fake photos, claiming a secret American weapon caused the fires. In the 2018 Mexican election, Venezuelan and pro-Russian trolls promoted messages opposing the North American Free Trade Agreement, supporting López Obrador, who later undermined Mexican democracy. These operations aimed to deepen political divisions and undermine democracy. Transnational repression. To develop the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the United Nations established the Commission on Human Rights in 1946. The drafting committee included diverse members from Canada, France, Lebanon, China, the Soviet Union, the UK, Chile, and Australia. Despite opposition from the Soviet Union, the majority of UNmembers ratified the document in 1948, emphasizing dignity, freedom, and justice. The proclamation forbade arbitrary detention, torture, and slavery and declared that every human has the right to life, liberty, and security. A number of accords and institutions were shaped by these ideas. The Helsinki Final Act, which formally ended World War II and recognized the inviolability of European boundaries, is one example. However, such documents often described ideals rather than reality. For instance, the Ungenocide Convention did not prevent the Rwandan genocide, and the Geneva Conventions did not stop torture in Vietnam or Iraq. Still, these documents have impacted real-world behavior. Soviet dissidents used human rights language to embarrass their government, and Americans who mistreated Iraqi prisoners were court-martialed. The unclassified China's mistreatment of Uyghurs as crimes against humanity in 2022. The International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants for Russian officials in 2023 after children were abducted from Ukraine. Autocracies are now trying to remove human rights language from international discourse. China, for example, prioritizes the right to development and sovereignty to avoid external criticism. Russia promotes multipolarity to challenge Western dominance. Both countries aim to replace universal rights with their own terms like win-win cooperation and mutual respect to avoid scrutiny. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization and BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa are forming new international institutions that emphasize sovereignty and non-interference. These groups aim to spread autocratic power globally. They promote rule by law, where laws are defined by autocrats rather than the rule of law. The hijacking of a Ryanair plane by Belarus in 2021 exemplifies this shift. Belarus diverted the plane to arrest a dissident, showing confidence in support from autocratic allies. Belarus faced no significant consequences, highlighting the growing influence of autocratic regimes. Transnational repression is the term for the behavior of autocratic regimes frequently reaching outside their boundaries to persecute, detain, or murder their own citizens. More than 600 incidents have been documented by the human rights organization Freedom House. In London and Salisbury, England, Russian military intelligence operatives have employed nerve agents and radioactive poisons on opponents of the Kremlin. Iran has targeted Iranians living in exile in the US, Europe, the Middle East, and Latin America. In January 2023, the US indicted 3 gang members for plotting on behalf of the Iranian government to murder Masih Alinejad, a citizen and critic of the Iranian regime in Brooklyn. Autocracies sometimes support each other in these efforts, giving them a quasi-legal appearance. Members of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization have agreed to recognize each other's definitions of terrorism, separatism, and extremism, leading to deportations. Thailand and Turkey have detained and deported dissidents to Russia and China. China monitors its diaspora, with agents visiting or threatening Chinese democracy activists in the US and Canada. A former Venezuelan military officer, Ronald Ojeda, was kidnapped and killed in Santiago, Chile, in February 2024 by 4 individuals posing as Chilean police. The Rwandan government has persecuted or killed opposition figures living in Belgium and South Africa. These attacks aim to eliminate, intimidate, or neutralize political exiles. Transnational repression degrades the rule of law in target countries, making violence against foreigners seem normal. Democracies come to accept lawlessness within their borders, as they accept violence on a larger scale. In Syria, the UN's attempt to de-escalate violence in Idlib in 2018 failed. Russia and Syria used unprovided coordinates to target hospitals. This normalized attacks on humanitarian aid workers and institutions. The Syrian civil war saw the use of proxies and mercenaries, such as the Wagner Group, funded by the Russian state. These groups operate with impunity, conducting business deals and propaganda campaigns. Autocracies now offer regime survival packages to dictators, including personal protection, violent assaults on enemies, and media campaigns. From Dictatorship to Democracy. Gene Sharp, an American academic, wrote From Dictatorship to Democracy, advocating nonviolent revolution. Sharp wrote that dictatorships have collapsed or stumbled when faced with defiant, mobilized people. Sharp believed dictatorships survive because people are apathetic or afraid. If they overcome this and refuse to comply with the dictator, the regime will fall. Sharp opposed violence, arguing it is ineffective against dictatorships, which have superior firepower and resources. Instead, he suggested identifying the dictator's weaknesses, consolidating opposition, and undermining the regime's legitimacy. From Dictatorship to Democracy, published in 1994, became a global guide for democracy activists. Its appendix lists 198 nonviolent tactics, including speeches, protests, strikes, and economic non-cooperation. Sharp's ideas were inspired by Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. His ideas spread worldwide, influencing movements in Serbia, Syria, Venezuela, Belarus, and Iran. The display of symbols like logos and colors forces people to take sides. For example, Serbia's youth movement OPER, which means resistance, used a fist symbol in 1998. Symbols like this expose a regime's falsehoods and force individuals to confront their obedience. Creating links between social groups and classes is another tactic. The Hungarian Revolution of 1956 and Poland's Solidarity movement succeeded by uniting workers and intellectuals. Universal principles of freedom and justice often drive these movements. In 2009, a stolen election sparked protests in Iran. In 2016, when the opposition gained a majority in parliament but was unable to pass laws, protests broke out in Venezuela. In 2020, Belarusians protested a stolen election, wearing red and white. Police and soldiers joined them. Modern activists use encrypted messaging, VPNs, and social media to spread information and organize. The Hong Kong democracy movement adopted these tactics, learning from past protests. However, they were defeated by Chinese authorities who also studied these tactics. Smear campaigns. In 2016, Evan Mawarire, a pastor in Zimbabwe, made a powerful video criticizing the government. He spoke of the colors of his country's flag and how the ideals it represented were being trampled. He had no political background, and his desperation resonated with many of his fellow citizens, highlighting the impact of personal, heartfelt messages in mobilizing people. Mawarire's video and #ThisFlag went viral, making him a celebrity. People thanked him for voicing their long-held feelings. Initially, he thought the excitement would fade, but it grew. #ThisFlag became a national symbol, with people quoting the video and carrying Zimbabwean flags. Street vendors sold flags to meet the demand. Mawarire decided to release a video daily for 25 days to spark discussions about the country's state. The governor of the Zimbabwean Reserve Bank debated him on inflation and currency changes, and the tape went viral. Millions remained at home when Mawarire called for a nationwide strike. After ignoring him at first, the administration wrote off his video as a publicity stunt. Eventually, they saw him as a threat. Jonathan Moyo, Zimbabwe's Minister of Information, started a failed #OurFlag movement. The regime then launched a campaign to undermine Mawarire's authenticity and patriotism, portraying him as manipulated by outsiders and a traitor. Political smear operations are nothing new. Modern autocracies smear not just opponents, but their ideas, framing words like democracy and justice as evidence of treason and foreign influence. In 2009, Iranian authorities linked protest leaders to foreign media. Chavez smeared opponents as American agents. Zimbabwean authorities accused Mawarire of being sponsored by Western governments and engaging in financial scams. Although his appeal stemmed from his ordinary financial hardships, the dictatorship painted him as a con artist. According to Freedom House, these smear campaigns result in civil death, making it hard to lead a productive life. Mawarire was arrested, imprisoned, and tortured. The regime pressured him with threats to his family. He was eventually freed and left the country, but the campaign against him continued. Some supporters called him a traitor for leaving. Mawarire returned to Zimbabwe, was arrested again, and faced repeated attacks on his integrity. He realized his efforts were in vain and left the country with his family. In the past, regimes murdered dissenters, but modern autocracies prefer targeted violence to avoid creating martyrs. They pass laws to monitor and control civic organizations, labeling them as terrorists or extremists. Russia, Yemen, Turkey, Eritrea, Sudan, Uganda, Ethiopia, Cambodia, Venezuela, and Cuba have passed such laws. Organizations with foreign links receive more scrutiny. Similar laws exist in Georgia, Egypt, Sudan, Belarus, and China. False corruption allegations against dissidents deflect attention from a regime's corruption. Accusations create cynicism, making people distrust all politicians. Modern smear campaigns encourage mass participation, often through social media. The Venezuelan government pays people to repost propaganda. Saudi Arabia uses real and fake Twitter accounts to attack enemies. Public despair often follows the crushing of opposition movements. Technologies from Silicon Valley and PR tactics from Madison Avenue are used by governments worldwide to harass critics. In 2020, a Polish troll hired by the ruling party harassed judges critical of the government. Mexican President López Obrador attacked political scientist Denise Dresser, leading to online trolls targeting her. Mayor Paul Adamowicz of Gdansk was murdered in Poland as a result of a disinformation campaign. The US has seen similar abuses, with Trump inciting anger and harassment against his critics. If Trump uses federal power for personal retribution, the blend of autocratic and democratic tactics will be complete. How democracies can fight back. Democracies suffer when autocracies expand their power into the political, economic, military, and information domains. Putin and China's Roman 11 Jinping have denounced interference in sovereign states and warned against discussing democratic standards. The struggle for freedom is not a new Cold War. Democracies and autocracies are not neatly divided. Some autocracies seek cooperation with the democratic world, while some democracies have leaders inclined to break human rights conventions. There are differences within nations as well. Autocratic states have democratic movements, while democratic states have autocratic ones. Contemporary autocrats value information. They shape national attitudes and have an impact on international discussions. They invest in TV outlets, newspapers, and troll networks. To have local champions, they woo corporate executives and politicians in democracies. They amplify the same conspiracy theories across different platforms. After the Cold War ended, the US and its allies thought good information would win in the marketplace of ideas. However, the market for ideas isn't free. It's full of disinformation efforts and social media algorithms that favor polarizing and emotionally charged content. The algorithms may promote Russian or Chinese narratives. Verifying the facts and responding quickly is insufficient to combat dictatorial propaganda. By the time corrections are made, falsehoods have already spread widely. Many people are attracted to disinformation and conspiracy theories and do not seek reliable news. To counter these tactics, we need to understand and expose the information laundering epidemic. The U.S. State Department's Global Engagement Center took on this task in 2023. The center exposed planned Russian disinformation campaigns before they happened, a tactic called pre-bunking. It revealed disinformation campaigns in Africa and Latin America and informed local media. The French and German governments also exposed disinformation operations in their countries. Social media platforms are easy to manipulate, and reform is a vast topic with significant resistance. Platforms are wealthy and influential, and they lobby against change. Politicians oppose change as well, particularly those on the far right. Following Elon Musk's acquisition of Twitter, it has promoted radical and pro-Russian narratives. TikTok is also a powerful misinformation source. The far-right faction of the United States has orchestrated an outcry over bans and free speech, attacking researchers who explore how the digital world can become more transparent. However, the information system is built on laws and regulations that can be modified. Social media users should own their data and influence the algorithms. Lawmakers could come up with measures to offer citizens more power and hold businesses accountable if their algorithms encourage offensive content. International coalitions are also necessary. The US and its allies should work with media corporations to establish trustworthy news sources as the norm. Democratic media and politicians need to argue for transparency, accountability, and liberty. A joint effort could help citizens of autocracies understand their regimes better. Diasporas from Russia, Hong Kong, Venezuela, and Iran can amplify each other's messages. Activists can exchange experiences and plan strategies to access blocked websites. Today's autocrats focus on winning audiences by channeling resentment and hatred. To compete with them, nations and peoples must promote democratic values, break their monopoly on strong emotions, and show how the truth leads to change. To guarantee that investigations result in penalties, journalists who uncover wrongdoing must collaborate with attorneys. Good information must bring positive change, and truth must lead to justice.